It represents the biggest loss of life in a single day in Israeli history.
The bloodiest breakout from Gaza into Israel.
Israeli government spokesperson Avi
Let's
Hyman.
go then to Jerusalem. We can speak to the Israeli government spokesman, Avi Hyman. Mr. Hyman.
Spokesman Avi Hyman.
Avi Hyman, he's an official with the Israeli...
Mr. Hyman, thank you for making time this afternoon.
Avi, good afternoon.
Avi Hyman in Jerusalem.
Government spokesperson Avi Hyman that Israel will make the decisions necessary
as the gold standard for urban warfare.
But at the end of the day, it's us that grabbed our toddlers, it's us that grabbed our babies and ran for cover. So that's an outrageous framing of the reality. We're fighting as a terrorist organisation that spent the last 16 years embedding itself underneath and within a civilian population.
In an underground Hamas dungeon held by masked monsters with machine guns to bring home every last hostage. None of us are free until all of us are free. Which is in their charter. They seek the genocide of the Jewish people, both in Israel and around the world.
Copying and pasting Hamas figures as if Hamas hadn't just plowed through our borders and butchered babies. They butchered babies, they butchered the truth.
Hamas has managed to break many a moral compass. In the world today of moral relativism, when people are putting the baby beheaders on the same plane as those pure innocent babies.
We will destroy Hamas. We will return peace and security to the people of Israel.
Welcome to another episode of Talk with the Scot. I'm here with somebody that is very familiar being in front of a camera, Avi Hyman. Thank you for taking the time to sit with me.
It's
good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So, originally from London, born to a Scottish father, Egyptian mother, moved here when you were 18, 19, I think?
19, yeah.
19. Why move here?
So I would say I can remember as old as 6, 7, wanting to come to Israel, learning about the Jewish people's connection to this country, the historical connection. I wanted to be a part of the unfolding history that is Israel. My great-grandfather was born here. I come from a refugee family on both sides, without getting deeply into those stories. But growing up in London, I never felt at home in London. And the first time I came to Israel, I actually was 6, and I did feel at home, as strange as that sounds. I felt there was something different here, and I still feel that every single day.
That's a good enough reason. So, you served in the army, and then that was, if I understand correctly, that was your first insight into the world of communication, the world of the media. Talk a little bit about what you did in the army and how it really acted as a platform, a springboard to what you ultimately chose as a career.
So I'll go back a little bit before that. I'll tell you that age 16, I wrote my first press release for pro-Israel activism in England. And like I said, my direction was always towards Israel, life-wise. I always knew I was going to come here. Came here at age 19. Did various things, worked in sales and marketing. Cold call sales was something that really pushed me forward career-wise. I joined the army actually much later than most, at age 24. I'd already worked in PR, I'd already worked in sales and marketing. There's a backstory for that, I'll save it. And I went into the IDF Spokesman's Unit. Essentially, I went into the office of the head of the International Spokesman's Unit, and I said, listen, there is a backstory. I've wanted to go to the army for a very long time. I can provide PR services. I know what public relations is. I've got the experience. Let me in. And she said, I would love to have you. Good luck with the bureaucracy of getting in. It took me a year to fight the bureaucracy, and I served for a year and a half. Now, what did I do day to day? I worked with the international media in the broadest sense of the terms. Because I was older than the average soldier, I was sent to do the stuff that others didn't want to do. So if that was going to court cases where actual convicted terrorists were sitting were in court, and I was accompanying journalists there and trying to give over the IDF's perspective, trying to translate back and forth, etc., to seeing the newest and best technology coming out of the IDF. For example, I took one of the first journalists to see this new top secret piece of technology called the Iron Dome. We went at night to a base somewhere near Haifa, pitch black. We saw this strange box-looking thing. We got this nerdy explanation of like Star Wars-like technology. I was like, I don't know when or if this is ever going to come out, but this is crazy talk, right? that was the Iron Dome, and we feel the Iron Dome every single day. In many ways, I felt like I was kind of, it's funny to say, but I felt like I was a tourist within the army. Like a lot of my friends, even now, are doing crazy things and putting their lives on the line day in, day out. And I salute them, and I wish I could have been one of them. And I still wish I could have been one of them. But what I was doing was showcasing the greatest of what the IDF has to show. I'll give you an example. It wasn't all roses, okay? I remember one time, and I brought this up in my first job interview for a PR firm, an international PR firm. It's a live fire exercise. I was taking a crew from a Chinese outlet, Xinhua. It's like the BBC of China. And live fire exercise means they're using live ammunition. There's certain protocols set up so no one gets shot accidentally. It does happen.
Yeah.
And we're running. And the guy turns to me and he goes, Avi, need to pee now. I was like, no, you pee there. He's like, no, need to pee right now. He starts peeing. I see the forces coming towards us. I hear the gunshots shooting. I literally look up to the heavens and say, Shema Yisrael, the word that Jews say when they're about to be killed. I'm like, this is over, and this is not how I wanted it to go down. He quickly pees, and then the force comes forward, etc. That is doing PR under fire. That's what I learned in my first few months in the IDF Spokesman's unit. It would carry me forward into my career in many ways. Firstly, I work with pretty much every media outlet that there is in the world, from Russian to Chinese to Japanese to British, American, Arabic, you name it. I knew the media map globally. That I learned under fire and through various operations, military operations, etc. Also, I made contacts, friends of mine from across the political spectrum, across the educational, socioeconomic, you name it. I built a network there that still till today I lean on as friends of mine in the industry. We'll dip back into that later.
Yeah. So the Avi of today, your mid-40s, looking back at the level of PR and communication that you were providing back then, how does that compare to today's Avi?
I might upset a lot of people by saying this, but I often say that in the IDF Spokesman's unit, I learned how not to do public relations. Now, without getting into the depths of that, a lot of the people working in those offices are not PR people, they're soldiers.
Yeah.
We have a joke within the IDF Spokesman's unit that, who would the best spokesman be? Where would they find the best of all of the people in Israel? Well, likely someone from intelligence, someone who grew up in the intelligence units of the IDF, someone who was sworn to secrecy from the first day they walked in the IDF, who doesn't like to share stories, who can't communicate very well, someone who ideally doesn't speak English very well or at all. That's where they would often go. It's changed. Yeah. Things have got a lot better. But in the day, that's what we talk about. So, and the ability to rapidly respond, again, in my day, was very, someone calls up, we need a response from the IDF now. We're on deadline. 2 weeks later, the IDF sends a response. We've looked into the situation. We're still looking into it. We'll endeavor to find out what happens and get back to you. The story was out 2 weeks ago, right? So what's different? I'd say everything is different from back then. But what isn't different is I learned how to work under pressure, under serious pressure, and I learned the media game. See, when I went to a journalist and said, hands up, I'm just the messenger, I can't get you the answer, I understood what that meant for the journalist. I understood that I was essentially screwing over the journalist. Nowadays, I understand that if I want to get my client on TV or in the newspaper, their deadline works for me. The quicker I respond, the better I respond, the more substantive the answer is, the more likely my client gets to the top of the pile in the article itself, is showcased more prominently. So I learned a lot. I've changed a lot. I've grown a lot. But we're talking now, this was coming up to 20 years ago. I can't count anymore, but 15, 20 years ago, yeah.
More, yeah.
Who knows?
And the reason why I asked that is because as technology and how rapidly it's advancing, what differences exist between how PR and communications was done then as opposed to today? Obviously, as just said about technology, but the fact that I'm guessing things are so instant that if you don't have, you just mentioned, if you don't have an answer right there now, they're probably making up stuff or they're just going to another source or whatever it might be. So how does that impact on you with all these clients that you're working with?
So back then, I remember one specific big security incident, the Turkish flotilla, for those in the know, where it was literally me and a close friend of mine who still very close with, still works in PR field. We sat there next to phones, the phones with the cables that you'd pick up and hold to your head, and we're making notes and we're going back and forth. Nowadays, in the war, what I saw is mass WhatsApp groups, video from the F-16s or F-35s or whatever it was, being streamed straight to journalists within a matter of an hour, 2 hours. Claims being made, us coming out with some kind of footage immediately, which will inevitably be questioned. Yep. But the ability to respond with that technology is something else entirely. I'll give you another thing. Without speaking about the government role yet, but there was a time when there was a war, and I'm talking about 10 years ago, where someone who was a spokesman would have to physically drive from studio to studio. Now, post-COVID, etc., everything is Zoom. So what we did is we set up a studio, and you're in one of those studios, essentially it's my office, right? Set up a studio, which is just a computer. And if you want to go over and above, you put a light in there, and that's it. So the technology has changed entirely, across the board.
So you just obviously touched on your role in the government or representing the government. Before we got into that, because that's obviously a hot topic that we want to cover, about 10 years ago, you decided you're going solo. You took the brave decision to set up Avi Hyman's communications. I think ultimately, why? What was the process that you went through from where you were to deciding, I think, I can, it won't be easy, but I can do this?
So, like I said to you, initially I was working in sales, I was working in marketing. I would argue some of the hardest types of sales I was working on. I had a earpiece on, I would hear a click, and I'd have to sell a telephone service to someone random in the UK. I went from that to working in for different PR firms. I quickly climbed the ladder in one New York-based PR firm. I went in a little bit over entry level, and because of the movement in the firm, I managed to work myself up to become head of the Tel Aviv office in about 3 years. Now, something that I have the ability to do, which is very important for any business, but definitely for public relations, is to make it rain, to bring in business. So when I did my first PR internship, I'm jumping around a lot, but that's how my mind works, I'm sorry. When I did my first internship, I was the first intern in the history of that firm, Lone Star Communications in Jerusalem, to bring in business. And it was almost by mistake. I was talking to a friend and I said, I'm doing this internship in PR. They said, we need PR. And that was it. And from that moment, I realized, one second, I can get a piece of the pie. I can get 10% of the retainer. I can get, so fast forward to when I was working for another firm in Tel Aviv. It was the Tel Aviv office of a New York firm. I was also bringing in new business. It was kind of a natural aspect, so that I was massively supplementing my income. And I was essentially servicing clients almost exclusively that I brought in myself. And without saying anything too bad, I don't love the corporate world. It's not for me, right? I find it hard to sit on a chair, never mind to take orders that I don't understand from people that it was a difficult dynamic for me. So I got to a position where I was like, I'm not having fun here. I'm doing great work for my clients. My clients love me. I brought my clients in. It would only follow that I, can bring in my own clients. I can service them. Why am I restricted to having to get on a bus at 5:45 in the morning to bomb it down the highway from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, to sit in an office, to only have my boss wake up in New York at 3:00, but he knew that I was here at 8:30, and it didn't make sense. So at the height of my time in that firm, I had a team both in Israel and America of about 10. I was working on, anything up to about 15 different clients. At the low, I was by myself, although I was still representing that company, and I was servicing myself 8 clients. Now, normally, someone in PR would share 4 clients among a number of people in a firm. So like I was working at the highest level, I was making okay money, but then it clicked that I could make a lot more money, I could set my own hours, and I could be the master of my own destiny by just flicking a switch.
When you say you were working at the highest level, you mean in terms of the clients that you were servicing? So you dealing with blue chip companies or governments? Who are we talking about? You don't need to name.
Like household names, blue chip companies, government ministries, household brands.
Okay.
But I was leading in the accounts. I was doing the work. It wasn't like I wasn't at the highest level because it wasn't my firm. My name wasn't on the door.
No,
That's what I needed to change.
No, I get that. But what's interesting is you just said before that you're not one that fits into the corporate world, but government world is probably even more bureaucratic and bloated than the corporate world. So how do you correlate not wanting to work in the corporate world, but then obviously moving into, for a period of time, working in government?
So I would put the two together. They're very different. I didn't say that I enjoyed working in a government framework either. But again, what's different, whether I'm working for a blue chip company now or a government ministry or as hired help, if you will, within the government. I wasn't a government employee. It's a massive difference.
Yeah.
I get to call the shots as far as, how I do my work, when I do my work. I get to call the shots because they have hired me. That's a massive difference than what I described before. I have to race to Tel Aviv to be in the office at 8:30 for no good reason, to service clients that I have no interest in, that I would never go near with a barge pole, to make the big man money when he doesn't treat me so fantastically. And I could do this all very differently.
So we've sort of just touched a little bit on your role representing the government, not a government employee. So let's get into it, because from the outside, for a lot of people, it's probably very exciting, an exciting opportunity, and I'm sure you learn a massive amount on many different levels. Tell us how it actually came about, though.
So since I established my firm, I do a full range of public relations, like I said, for high-tech companies, venture capital, government ministries, political campaigns. So you could say, and this is me maybe being slightly modest, maybe not, that I am in the outer inner circles of the Prime Minister from the various things that I've worked on. So maybe 6-7 years ago was the first time I actually got a call from the Prime Minister to hire me. And again, politics aside, I'm just a guy who moved to Israel age 19 without a degree to my name, without much to my name. And I got called by the Prime Minister of Israel to say he wanted me to help him. That blew my mind literally, and I nearly fell off my seat literally. Okay, so now fast forward. The war of wars has erupted. We were all taken by surprise. From my perspective, and I think from the perspective of the Prime Minister as well, actually, but from my perspective, this could have been the end of Israel. And from a philosophical point of view, this could have been the end of the Jewish people as we know it. If Israel went down, we would have been in a serious situation. And that was palatable. No one knew what was going to happen the next day. No one knew what was happening in the next few hours. There was a while, remember, where we lost control of at least large swaths of our country, cities, areas. It was awful, to say the least. And I had this inner struggle of, I'm not doing enough. Everyone in my neighborhood that was a man of the right age and the right physical ability had been called up that day. It was like a ghost town. You walk around, there was like women and children, and Avi supposed to be like, oh, I think I'll go to work now. It was bizarre. Now, that being said, I was working on a lot of clients, Israel-based clients. One was Magen David Adom, the national ambulance service.
Yeah.
So I was pushing my clients 24/7. Actually, then it was probably 24/6. It's another discussion. I was pushing my clients around the clock, but it wasn't enough. And I turned to my wife. I said, I've got to be doing more. And I walked into the other room, and I got a call, and it was a call from one of the closest people in the inner circle with the Prime Minister. And he says to me, Avi, have you been called up? And I said, no. And he said, well, I'm calling you up. I said, okay. He said, I want you to come in and book interviews and do interviews. And I went silent. And he goes, should I call you back? I said, yeah. I went to the other room. I said, you're not going to believe me. We're just literally talking about this. I just got a call from the Prime Minister. I just found out that she just become pregnant in the last few, those weeks, early pregnancy. I was expecting her to put the brakes on. She's like, go now. Don't ask me again, or I'll never hear the end of it. Well, I did go immediately. I started booking interviews that afternoon. It's important to say that I didn't know what I was being called up for. I didn't know if I was being called up for the IDF Spokesman's unit. Yeah. I didn't, because everything was a big mess in the first few days of the war. I know that I was being called up for the Prime Minister's office. It's important for your listeners to understand that everyone has reserve duty. So this guy, yes, he's in the inner circle of the Prime Minister's office, but he could have been called up for reserve duty in the army. I had no idea. But I said, I'll do and then I'll learn, to paraphrase the Bible. And so that day, a few minutes later, I was on the phone to Ambassador Mark Gregor, former ambassador of Israel to England, and the Prime Minister's office's spokesman, like a legend that I'd grown up wanting to be. Suddenly he's calling me. I'm booking interviews for him. I'm booking interviews for Prime Minister, for senior ministers from here, from my office. Yeah. The next day, I would report to the war room, essentially, the IDF headquarters. The Prime Minister has an office in the IDF headquarters. We set up a studio there, and I would work from there. And going forward from that, I would book 1,000 interviews for myself, for other spokespeople, for ministers, for the Prime Minister. And I would do 150 myself, including daily briefings to the international media.
So for anybody that's, people that are watching this have maybe seen some of your interviews, how much preparation, how do you prepare for one of those interviews?
So it's important to note that professionally, I've been training people for TV for years, okay? CEOs, business leaders, whatever, how to convey the message clearly, how to enunciate, etc., etc. There is nothing on God's earth that will prepare you for being an Israeli government spokesman during an existential war on 7 fronts. There is nothing, because it's a total different set of rules for the media when dealing with us.
Well, that's why I'm asking how you prepare for it, because I would imagine you're going into, an interview, and whether it's BBC, CNN, whatever, it doesn't matter. And you probably know going into that you're going to be on the back foot, and you, to some extent, you have to justify everything. I mean, everything, no matter what it is, you're having to justify, as opposed to if you're going on and giving an interview about a new client, product, or whatever. It's a very different dynamic. So, I mean, how do you deal with that? Not so much in preparation, but just like up here, knowing that you've got to justify your answers to such a greater extent.
So let's do some of the preparation as well. The preparation was that I was being briefed from on the highest level on a daily basis, from the inner circle of the Prime Minister, what's going on today, what the other side is saying, what we're saying, what we know, what we don't know. The pressure was immense. I'll say myself, firstly, as someone who trains people for interviews, I called in one of my mates who's a professional trainer. Again, she's trained CEOs, captains of industry, to come in and give me at least one session to polish me up a little bit as to, so that I was ready to do what I needed to do. There is no pressure like it, because lives are literally dependent on my every word. And I don't say that as someone with a big ego. I've got an okay size ego, all right? But I say that as I saw how we interacted to messages coming out from the enemy. They said X, so we will do X. They said Y, we will do Y. So once upon a time, people thought of the role of a spokesman as an accessory. It's nice, it's like a type of diplomat that makes things kind of look a little bit nice and shiny from the outside, but the war is being fought on the battlefield. No, it goes in tandem. The messaging that we're pushing out or not pushing out can affect lives on the battlefield every single day. Ultimately, one of my biggest roles I saw was to keep public opinion, not mass public opinion, but at least in the diplomatic corps and in the governments that are important to us around the world, on our side. On that level, while I was in, did I manage to do it? Well, I being myself, the other spokespeople, the Prime Minister, his inner circle, his yes, because the war's still going on. If I was in at the moment, again, not to time the interview too much, but there are ups and downs. But that is ultimately the role. The role isn't to convince every Tom, Dick, and Harry that Israel's a fantastic country, that they should invest in Israel, they should move to Israel, No, it's we are fighting a war that must be fought, that must be won for the sake of our children, our grandchildren, and future generations. That is a message that needs to get across. Very, very difficult when you've got someone on the other side of the camera who doesn't necessarily believe that there's any need for the one and only Jewish state, that doesn't believe that we're justified in our ongoing war, that's never been here often and can't fathom what's actually going on the ground, can't fathom that when I give a report that X people were killed, be it citizens or soldiers, or that people are being held, they can't fathom that I'm one person away from these people. That sometimes I know the person that was just killed. That sometimes when I'm talking about a hostage being held in Gaza, that's my friend's son. So the emotional turmoil is immense. There's nothing like it. I don't think you can compare it to any other country and any other spokesman, even during war, because, they say Jews are news. If it bleeds, it leads. Those are terms that are thrown around in the PR world, and it's the Jewish PR world. And this is where it all comes together on a war the likes of which we have never seen and hopefully we'll never see again. So the pressure was absolutely immense. I think I wrote on LinkedIn one time about, early on in the day, you call it stage fright. I don't know what to call it. I'm not a psychologist. But before one interview, I just put on my tie and I started kind of losing it mentally. And I threw up. And I went to Tal Heinrich, one of the other spokespeople, who's amazing. I said, Tal, she's a TV anchor now. She's come back to becoming a TV anchor. I said, Tal, you're on. The interview was in 2 minutes. I called up the producer because I was booking the interviews and doing the interviews. And I'm like, yeah, I can't do it now. Scheduling issue. Tal's coming on. She's great. And she was great. And I remember, Mark Regev, who is my mentor and will always be my mentor. I literally listened to his podcast before I sat with you now. He was training me as we were going. He kept saying to me, Avi, there's something wrong with your tie. Your tie's not right. And I realized later it wasn't my tie. It was my freaking neck. It was my head. It was going to explode. The pressure was so immense. But then someone took me aside and said to me, Avi, and again, ego aside, Avi, you were born for this. You were chosen to do this. You were put in this place now. And your friends, literally my friends are on the front lines. They're relying on you. You have forgotten more than most people interviewing you know about this conflict. Get out, go out and do it. And then it clicked for me. And then after that, my interviews were kind of, my words, they're not now, but my words just flowed easier. I was at home with the content. I knew that whatever they would throw at me, more or less, without talking about dirty tricks that they pull in the studio, I could answer anything they threw at me. I knew how to.
So it's funny that you've just said that, because there was one particular, and I sent you a message just after this interview came out, because you did one interview in the BBC. After the interview, went back to the BBC reporter who was interviewing you, and her words, I think it was, and that was Avi Hyman saying nothing special as usual. Something to that. You might know the words exactly. I can't remember, but it was like that.
Avi Hyman saying nothing special.
Let's talk about dealing with that level of criticism, because that's out on national television. She's basically having a cheap shot when you're no longer able to defend yourself. How do you deal with that?
So I'm going to burst your bubble. Maybe I should have done this off camera before.
Go on.
And I'm going to teach you a little bit about the manipulation of video content.
Of course.
In this case, I manipulated that.
Go on.
Because what actually happened was I was giving a daily press briefing to the media, which again went out via Zoom. It's not like in the White House where they're all sitting there. It went out via Zoom. And I was asked a question, I can't remember by what outlet, about the exact position of our soldiers. They've moved from here to here. What does that mean? And I said, that doesn't mean anything special. So she went back to the studio taking that clip and she said, Avi Hyman saying nothing special. A mate of mine sent that to me and goes, you should clip that. I clipped that. I've now used it as like a GIF or a response to friends when they say, what do you think of this? I sent it. Avi Hyman said nothing special. I was saying there was nothing special about the movement of our troops. But because I shared that by itself, people think she was having a dig at me. Actually, I've got a pretty good relationship with her. I did my first ever live TV interview long before the war with her, Lise Doucette at the BBC. And I actually sent it to her and we had a laugh about it as well.
Right, but the question's still relevant.
Yes, okay? It is.
How do you deal with, because before we came on, we were sitting talking, and you said that, you know, since you took on that position as spokesman for the government, you've received a lot of hate via social media. You told me about some examples. People on social media are saying that you should be tried for war crimes. You know, that's big stuff. So, you know, you're a father of five, married father of five. How do you reconcile with that, and how do you deal with it?
So again, you have to put things in perspective, which is, and this was always my perspective, my friends are on the front lines. I spoke to a friend the other day who's gone into his, I think maybe 4th round of reserve duty in Gaza. He's got a baby on the way, and his commander turned to him when they were going into Gaza. He said, for the first time since the beginning of the war, and said, I want everyone to know that this time we are going to incur casualties. We are going to lose people. But I want you to be rest assured that we're not going to leave a single man in the field. Now, that was supposed to be strengthening words as they were going into Gaza. My friend obviously was shattered because we don't want to lose anyone. We want to go out and we want to come back. So when I juxtapose that with me getting, I mean, are they bots? Are they real people? I kind of vision a lot of them as, you know, overweight losers in their mum's basement, like writing, the Goebbels of Gaza and war crimes. Put things in context. I don't have bullets whizzing past me. That being said, it really does pull you down, and you've got to constantly be checking in with your friends, with your family, with your colleagues, and understanding that, you know, stick to the mission. Like one line that I threw around to my colleagues in the war room, if you will, and this actually came up later in Mark Regeb's podcast, which I must plug, Israel Undiplomatic, highly recommended, is that I would say stay in your lane. Stay in your lane, meaning that I walk into the IDF headquarters and be, Avi, what do you think about this political whatever? What do you think about what this minister did? I said, we've got a job to do. Stay in your lane. And really, that's what we had to do. Is it difficult day in, day out? Yes. When a bad interview goes out or a good interview goes viral or whatever it is, you'll get 3 days of total incoming. And it's probably best to not look at Twitter. It's probably best to never look at Twitter, but not to look at Twitter for a couple of days. And specific channels have much stronger anti-Semitic followings. And you see that. It's very, very difficult, but you got to stay laser focused on the mission.
So let me put it another way. You do a bad interview and forget, you know, the backlash that may come from that, whether that's from colleagues or just social media or whatever it might be. How do you deal with it because you feel that you've not done a good job?
All right, so if I'm gonna, you know, cut the crap, if you will, sleepless nights. It's very, very difficult. It's hard to sleep. It's hard to think about much else. But again, you know, I remember one of the worst, probably in my mind, the worst interview that I did. Half an hour later, I had to do another interview, and it was one of the best interviews that I did.
Right.
And you have to kind of compartmentalize that in your mind. That's not to say that after I did that second interview that was great, I wasn't like feeling like crap for days. I remember sitting with colleagues and saying like, what do I do now? And them telling me like what I just said, like after a few days, everyone's forgotten it. I'll never forget it. But you just got to keep going forward. Like the mission is far bigger than me.
So are you still, even though you've been in this field for many, many years, worked with, as you've outlined, you know, some of the most prominent people or topics, global issues, you feel that every interview you do, you're still learning and developing from it?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done a TV interview now for a year. I stepped out of the service a year ago. My son just turned 1. Yeah, every single interview I would watch multiple times afterwards. You know, he said, how do you prepare for interviews? I would watch colleagues' interviews. I would watch Prime Minister's interviews and see how they respond to answers. Not just how they respond verbally, but how they respond physically. Body language and that type of thing is also very important. And every single time I would tweak my answers. I would see what worked and what didn't work. You have to do that. You know, it clicked one day in the early days of the war. Elon Levy, who's risen to fame, I remember him when he was just a TV anchor and friend. He had done a lot of interviews that day, and it was probably past midnight. and he still had another one or two. And me and Mark Greger were about to leave the office. It was an early night. And Mark turned to Elon and said, do some jumping jacks. Do some jumping jacks, drink some water. At which point I realized this is a competitive sport. These are athletes. What we're doing, and I'm not very athletic, right? What we're doing is a form of, physical activity with huge mental strain. So if you haven't eaten well and you haven't exercised and you have to be top of your game. If you're not, you're going to lose that, whether it's football or whether it's doing an interview on CNN.
Yeah.
There's a clear connection there.
I mean, we've been talking, I don't know for how long, but throughout the conversation, you've been throwing out little ideas and bits that you've learned and how you prepare. When you deal with your clients or leaders around the world, what's sort of the one main bit of advice that you give them?
Specifically when doing interviews?
Yeah.
So it's important to speak to people like you're speaking to people, meaning this is fantastic. I've done a lot of podcasts through Zoom and all kinds of other things, right? The fact that I'm sitting in front of you, I'm talking to you like a human, like we're having a cup of tea, like we're having a beer, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I can relate to you more, and I can probably relate to your audience in a better way. When I'm being interviewed, or my client's being interviewed by CNN, BBC, whoever, that means someone's turned on the TV, they've welcomed you in, and this again, mention him again, Mark Greger gave me this advice. They've welcomed you into their lounge, into their living room. They've chosen not to change the channel. They don't want you to shout at them. They don't want you to get in their face, because if you did that in their living room, they'd ask you to leave or they'd flick the channel.
Yeah.
They want you to just talk to them comfortably, explain things logically, and that's how to penetrate hearts and minds. So that I say to clients, it doesn't matter if you're selling a product, it doesn't matter if you're selling an idea, it doesn't matter. Relate to people as people, and they will internalize it to the heart. So if your product really is an amazing fit for them that they need, convey that to them. If you want to put on your radio voice and pound it at them, they don't want to be here. They will leave mentally. They will check out. So that's probably the biggest advice is human to human interaction, public relations. How do you relate to the public?
You said before you're now out of that environment, even though you might still be in contact with people that are still very active in that environment. When you look back at the role that you played, the work that you did on a purely personal level, do you think you achieved what you wanted to achieve?
During my time in there, yes, I achieved what I wanted to achieve. Could I have done certain interviews better? Yes. Could I have improved my general game? Yes. Could I have optimized certain things and procedures so that I could get even more interviews and book even more? And absolutely.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but what, you're talking about things that you could do better or the learnings that you've taken away. Give us some examples.
Listen, let's call a spade a spade. From the outside, things look very maybe glamorous, Hollywood, TV, whatever, right? But the reality is I was a business owner at a very difficult time, called in to serve my country with my laptop and my phone and my own Rolodex. Okay? Things shouldn't have had to be like that, but they were like that. Okay? So if you threw a budget at me and said, how can you make things better? I would write a book on how to make things better. I would know how to make things better, and just a day-to-day interaction. Okay? Within the first few days of the war, I passed off any non-English speaking language media to a volunteer. I said, you're going to be doing the Greek and the Indian and the, everything that's not Canada, US, England, Australia, you're doing. And that, freed me up massively. And my brief essentially was English language media anyway.
Okay.
So that was something that I did. But my job, and I was working some nights till 3 a.m. and coming home and sleeping a bit and then waking up 6 and going back to Tel Aviv 6, 7, whatever. My job was the job of a team. Things could have been massively changed. That being said, those who fought, myself and those around me, fought valiantly and did an incredible, incredible job. My greatest regret is that I'm not in a position financially, life-wise, because of the system. You spoke about bureaucracy, not my friend. Because of the system, a myriad of reasons. My greatest regret is I'm not able to continue in that role. that I'm not able to make that from a national level and from a nuts and bolts level a better system. Maybe in the future, I think probably in the future, I will be brought back to that world.
So that's what I was going to ask. If you got the phone call tomorrow, we need you back, what 3 things would you do differently?
I would want to understand the parameters of the job a lot better because it was very fluid. I would build a team, be it volunteers or professionals, whatever. I would work out a better and quicker way to get messaging from the higher echelons. I'd be lying if I didn't say that there was a few times where I went, did interviews where I was throwing questions that I couldn't answer, not because I didn't have the gift of the gab, but because I didn't know the answer.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things that would change. Most of them are sort of managerial, logistic. I would love to be in a situation where this is a finger in the eye of the bureaucracy, by which your ability to do the job leads and not, this one knows that one, or this one took less money, or whatever it was. Which is often how bureaucracy, this guy's been here for 20 years, he must know the job. No, I want to bring people in from the outside that know PR well and will service the state of Israel in the same way that they would service any other client. We need a professional overhaul of the national diplomacy on that level. It needs to be done just like any other PR firm. That doesn't mean that the country should hire random PR firms in New York, the best and the brightest in New York. No, they need to be people that are intrinsically connected to the story, who understand the story on an emotional and a physiological level, and know PR.
Yeah. So you touched on, failings and things that you can learn,
which is hard because we're both British, essentially, right?
Absolutely, and we never fail. But I'm interested to hear. I'd just expand on the failing side a little bit, because I'm interested to hear, one particular interview that really didn't go according to plan at all. You ended it, or the interview finished. You obviously were deflated. How did you bounce back from that? And what did you learn from it? Like, were you underprepared, or you just didn't have the information? But then, how did you move forward? Because that's something you look yourself in the mirror and you think, not only have I let myself down, I've let a lot of other people down. And that, to some extent, is applicable for everyone. It doesn't matter if you're in PR or you're in, you're a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. If you feel that you've let your team down to some extent, what did you learn and how did you respond to that? So
the one that comes front of mind and probably always will is Piers Morgan. I went on Piers Morgan. The first half of the interview was fine. Had a great back and forth. I was conveying the messages I was sent there to convey. And then at one point, I gave some information, the number of terrorists that we knew that we'd killed in Gaza to date. And he jumped in and said, well, how many civilians have you killed? Now, that's a complicated question. When it's on TV and when it's glitzy clickbait TV, and it's not TV because it's actually one of the world's biggest YouTubers, because he was kicked off all other TV stations, just to quickly jab there. It sounds like a very basic question, but we know how many terrorists we killed because we work on specific intelligence. We hunt them down. We confirm the kill with various different methods. And we know down to the numbers almost precisely who we killed because we're not going after anyone but terrorists, right? It's a very strategic, surgical almost process to avoid civilian casualties. Are there civilian casualties in every war? Absolutely. Are they heart-wrenching and the hell of war? Absolutely. But what Piers decided to do, and it was clearly a premeditated ambush, because you see if you look at it closely as I did, he's looking at his notes, he's got a clear line of questioning. He did, in boxing terms, he got me in the corner and he just started pounding and he wasn't giving up. And so he just asked me the same question again and again. How can you know how many terrorists you killed? He probably didn't say terrorists, militants, whatever, and not know how many civilians you killed. Well, there's a clear answer for that. We're not going after civilians. There's also various other, dare I say, canned answers that I could give, explanations that I give, practiced, tried and tested. I had them all ready to go, but he's been in the business longer than I have, and he's in the gotcha business. And so he put me in that corner, and there was no way that I could convey any answer. So yeah, I've rerun it in my mind. And why is that? Not because I didn't have the answers. Not because he hadn't answered the same questions to others before. and I hadn't practiced, etc. But because they were playing with my mic, they were changing the on-screen situation while it was going on. So he'd ask me a question, and they'd be on me, and then they'd flip back to him in the studio. So you'd think that I wasn't talking, but they'd turn off my mic. I was talking. I was trying to talk, and he didn't interrupt multiple times. So he wasn't allowing me to speak, to convey what should have been a very clear, 10-second answer, right? So there wasn't anything I could do. Now, fast forward, okay, just to put this all in context. A few days later, I was given that number. Again, it's an estimation. It's a war. As I've explained to other people, it's not a video game. You don't get immediate stats. This is messy, awful war that we never wanted to be in, right? But we must win. So as I've explained, so I got those numbers. I gave those numbers to his producer. You would assume that they published them immediately. No, they didn't. Not only did they not publish them, they used my interview on multiple other spokespeople later. Look, this is what Avi Hyman says. What do you have to say? Do you have an answer? How many civilians died? Fast forward a year, the Israeli ambassador to England, Sipi Khotobeli, did an interview last few days with Piers. He asked her the exact same question 17 times. I got off lightly. I was asked maybe 4 or 5 times, and I felt like the floor had been pulled from underneath me, and there was no way to get out. She was asked 17 times. Okay, so the same tactics, the same questions. It's not that you don't have the answers. Yeah. It's not that you don't have access to the answers. It's that clicks sell. Your, business model, you mean Piers Morgan's business model is based on eyeballs. And it's a sorry state of affairs for an industry that we grew up loving. Like I remember as a kid on a Saturday morning, my dad would get the Saturday Times newspaper delivered to the house, and they had the children's, supplement. And I would read it religiously and love it. I fell in love with the media back then, right? Because the media would educate us, would give us the information that we need. I don't know why we need it, but apparently we need this information, right?
So you mean it's all changed since then?
It's all changed to just, it's entertainment. Piers Morgan is a YouTuber trying to get views. And it's kind of painful when you think that, all right, half of the interview was solid, right? But you think that interview was on his outlet viewed by millions, maybe 5-6 million. I don't remember. I don't know the current numbers. And it was run by multiple newspapers and on and on and on. It went viral beyond belief. And everyone's like, but Avi, you know the answer. Yes, I know the answer. Now you be put in that situation and you do a different situation and you respond differently.
One more question, and then we're going to move on to something that I've not done before during this podcast. But obviously everybody hears about, you worked in this position for a year, maybe a year and a half. You've not been in it for a year now, on a personal sacrifice. And I know that there are people in the front line, and I get all that. But you're a business owner. You're a father of, as I said before, father of 5 kids, wife. What was the impact on your business whilst you were doing this? Because that's also a learning curve, and people don't see that.
So this is something I've never publicly spoken about before. You've reeled me in, and I don't really feel comfortable speaking about it, but I will. I don't feel comfortable on a national level because people don't understand, again, what my gig was. I told you, it was Avi Hyman was brought in with his laptop. It wasn't, and at the time I had clients. My business was probably better than it had ever been before the war. And I had to somehow juggle the fact that I had this new client that was literally taking out 24/7. I say 24/7. I'm a religious Orthodox Jew. I don't work Saturdays. From Friday night, sundown, to Saturday night, sundown, I don't work. I don't touch my phone. I don't touch electricity. Well, I did for the sake of this war, and that's religiously okay because there are lives on the line. 24/7, I was working on that, and somehow in between, I had to be servicing my full book of business.
Yeah,
I did that by hiring people. That obviously took my bottom line down dramatically. I'll say it how it is. My business took a massive hit. The strain on my family, my wife at home with 4 kids, pregnant. I told you the glory side of the situation that I made Aliyah, I moved to Israel by myself and pioneer and all the rest of it. But that means that we have no family. Most people, when they go into reserve duty, they throw the kids at grandma, and it's not that bad. Most people that go into reserve duty, they get 100% of their paycheck paid by the government.
Yeah.
That wasn't my situation. I got a stipend from the government, but it was a client. I started hemorrhaging clients. I got in very bad financial situation. And I'll be honest, a year later, I'm still building back the business and took a massive, massive hit. I don't think I'm unique in that sense, and I would do it all the same again. I'm proud of what I did. But yeah, if you're talking on a purely individual, personal business side, myself and many, many others have taken a massive financial hit from this war. But yeah, I mean, my business versus the country going down. Like, I felt that at a time when the country was really going down, I had to step up to the plate. I did, and I'd do it again.
That's a good, honest answer. Okay, we're going to do something that I've said before, that I've not done before.
Let me just drink some water.
Drink some water, and then we're going to do some quick fire rounds to end on. So let's see how you cope in front of the camera now.
Go for it.
What's one word that defines great leadership?
Strength.
Early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
Email, call, or face-to-face?
Face-to-face.
Most inspiring leader, dead or alive?
Jabotinsky.
Biggest leadership pet peeve?
Being annoying.
Being annoying?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't want long answers.
No, that's fine. Your superpower in a team setting?
Humour.
One thing you wish more leaders would do?
Be more human.
Favorite tool or app that boosts your productivity?
I think it's called Microsoft To Do. It's essentially a to-do list.
Okay. The book you recommend most to leaders?
Life.
Written by?
Nobody.
Okay. What's your go-to way to recharge after a tough day?
That's a very difficult question. I will give a longer answer. I have 5 kids. I'm still working on that.
You're still working on that? Avi, I know you're a busy guy. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.